Welcome, nerds. This is not fandoms. This is something completely new. If you've been, following us or even looked at the notifications, because we're getting so close to the Deadpool Wolverine movie, we are going to go ahead and run through a number of the Marvel Fox properties. That's right. We're going to be going through X-Men. Some of these weeks are going to be fantastic and fun. Some of them are going to be a labor of love. And this week, I can be glad to say that it is not a labor of love. That's next week. And so to get started, we're going to go ahead and talk about X-Men and X2 X-Men United. And to join me, we have Mickey or Self and Wall Keys, as well as Will Wilkins, that Will Wilkins on Netheads. Love it. I almost brought mine out, but I was afraid I was going to poke myself or cut something because mine's really sharp. But welcome, guys. How are y'all doing?
I'm
Hanging in there.
doing great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very excited to talk about two of the movies that I remember as being very, to us, they were groundbreaking and amazing because it really felt like the first thing that was at least trying to get some of the elements of the comics brought writ large on the screen for us.
And just as a reminder, this isn't the first Marvel property that did well in the box office. That credit goes back to the Blade movies. Again, those were more of the, I would call them like the midnight Marvel type stuff. If you think of like the Midnight Suns or whatnot, but definitely was one of the most mainstream that kind of really got traction until Monsters and things like Punisher and stuff like that. This is the most comic booky we would get until, just a year later with Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films and Sony. And then you think about this, associate producer Kevin Feige was on this as they were starting to formulate doing Marvel Studios. And technically Marvel Studios was just a subsidiary of Marvel Entertainment that went and consulted on these films, and that's why they have producer credits. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this, and I got actually prepared a bit. And so if you're listening, because this may go to audio only, for those who want to listen to it on the podcast, we will try to have this somewhere where you get to it. But of course, in the podcast, if we do this as a podcast, I'm just saying podcast way too much. You can follow the link to this YouTube and be able to see it. But we're going to go ahead and go through X-Men and X2, and we're going to just start from the beginning. So let's just talk about this. This was an ambitious film. This came out in 2000. CGI was still, I mean, we just were about 4 years after Jurassic Park. No, Jurassic Park was 93, so about 7 years after Jurassic Park. A lot of CGI, if you look back at that time, was dated and did not, transfer well. They did a lot of practical effects on this and tried to limit the CGI, which I think did well. They did more in the second film. But the budget for this one was about $75 million. And at that time, it grossed worldwide $296 million, just almost $297 million. And of course, this was done by Bryan Singer. First of all, what were your guys' first thoughts about this film when you saw it?
More Wolverine, please. That was originally my thought. It was an interesting take on a part of the Marvel universe that I really didn't have a massive amount of knowledge on. There'd been a little bit of catching X-Men, the cartoon, here and there, but I wasn't really fully versed, except for, and the reason why I was looking forward to this film was once I knew that Jean Grey was a part of it, because I distinctly remember one of those golden comic nerd moments that happens where I had very little knowledge in something and I was on a long walk with somebody that had deep knowledge of something, and I got a full dissertation on the X-Men, the Dark Phoenix saga, so much information, an amazing download of comic knowledge. So I was able to come into this having an idea of what was going on, who the characters were, and I thought that it was a very well told and well presented story where I could definitely understand what was going on. I think just like, the weirdest thing about the whole movie for me is just the fact that there's an entire scene that happens in a gift shop, basically. It's just like, was this to cut the budget, guys? But, that's just me.
Oh, are you talking about the Statue of Liberty gift shop?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
also that was the setting for the worst line of the entire film. If you want to really go deep in that, I saved the picture of that for later on. But yes, I mean we might as well just talk about it now. Halle Berry, has she ever said anything about saying that line? And of course, if you haven't watched the films or if you've forgotten, the line was as she's fighting against Toad. What happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else. And mind you, they maybe thought it was a good line at the time, but I don't know. It was.
I really don't think it's that bad.
It wasn't that good.
I mean, but like that's the problem with a lot of these movies because not these movies, but in the movies, you've got a long running tradition of kind of holding on to cliches, and there's always action movies have action stars saying stupid things to people that nobody would ever say conversationally.
True.
So that's probably why I didn't butt up against it.
Yeah, that's par for the course when it comes to comic books, right? Cheesy, corny lines that,
not to mention, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like time-wise, we have also at this point lived through the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, right? So we've had our Arnold Schwarzenegger yelling "chill out" and just like all kinds of just absolutely horrid movie puns. So really, that's probably why I was just desensitized.
I swear I do not believe that Batman and Robin exists. It just
it does.
It's not a good.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like they ruined a lot of good characters in that movie, and like it was Uma Thurman, wasn't it? That was Poison Ivy.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, did her so wrong. So yeah. So like you said before, more Wolverine, please. The first place we see Wolverine in this movie, of course, is after Rogue, kisses her boyfriend. She's on the run. She ends up in this place that is just past the border to Canada, and there's a fight club, and Wolverine's kicking butt and breaking hands, and of course the guy that he's holding on the left hand side there is the guy he fought last and was convinced that he was a mutant because he didn't bruise. And little did he know that was not the least of what he was able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love, I was actually coming back to this movie, and I when I saw him in this jacket, I'm like, oh, that's great. They actually did some continuity things when it comes to X-Men Origins Wolverine. And that was one of them for me. And it kind of made me happy.
I think the only thing that I didn't get excited about when I saw Hugh Jackman on screen was just, I was expecting Wolverine to be a little shorter. Yeah. That's it. Other than that, I was very happy with everything they gave us up until, just, I don't know why it took so long to hear him utter the word bub in the movie. Like, cause I think it's damn near the end. It's just like, come on, guys, you're going to give us all this, but you're not going to give us that.
Yeah. And it's not even that strong of a bub. Like, what was it? It was more prominent when he says bub for the first time in X2. Cause it's right in the kitchen when he's going at the guys that are coming to take the kids. But yeah, absolutely intense. I loved it. Let's also talk about Mystique. Now, again, it's been a while, far removed from me from the comics, but I remember diving into the X-Men. Of course, there was Magneto. Of course, you had the Brotherhood of Mutants. I remember the Blob was like a big deal for me. But Mystique wasn't really a very prominent character for me. And I think the movies did well for her. Like, it really made her more prominent. And of course they changed her outfit style. And I think that spoke to a lot of, pervy guys and made them super excited about it. But the character ultimately is just bad and is cool. And and is tough. And regardless of how she looks in the thing, and of course we get her a more reminiscent outfit for her later on with the James McAvoy X-Men. I think it's what is it, a Dark Phoenix? That we get more of a like the white and blue lined outfit. No skull belt, which was disappointing, but yeah, I mean she's pretty cool. And I liked how they fleshed out Senator Kelly a little bit in this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
was more good.
Oh no, I was just going to say it was an amazing way to kind of introduce the malevolence that they are up to. What is the long-term goal, while also giving us some of the more interesting and in some ways shocking visuals that we got from his experience in the movie. But of course, the other thing I'll always remember is him coming out of the ocean.
Yep.
And that's the first, I believe that's the first Stan Lee cameo
Right.
on
And
the
that comes
beach.
okay, well, if you're gonna go there,
I went there, my friend. I put it out
you
there
went
right
there.
there.
You went there one slide too soon. So yeah, there's Stan Lee. That's like the first time I really like noticed him in a cameo. It made me go back and look and see where I could find him anywhere else. You
No,
can tell
and
he definitely
I should
Good.
say cameo in a Marvel movie, because let's not forget the fact that he
Mallrats.
was, a featured character in Mallrats.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it was funny though because the story he said Mallrats wasn't real at all, which I loved because it just worked for the situation. People probably walked out of that movie being like, "Oh, I know something about Stan Lee," and they probably told people about it.
It
But
was
we're
because
going
of that movie established the friendship between Stan Lee and Kevin Smith. And because of all of his cameos in all of the Marvel movies, the thing he loved to say is that, he has this amazing box office record. And then there was Mallrats, which, cinematically did not do so well. Anyway, please, Tony, continue.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I think one of the things that and I'm just kind of running through this, and I don't know why I'm going so fast. But let's just go back for a minute and just go back to the opening of this film. Um, I knew it was something special when, I mean, you're going back to World War II.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a young Eric uh, being separated from his family and showing the power that he had even as a kid in bending those gates and how all those guards were holding him back. And I thought it was interesting. I think they realized, at least Fox realized, that was an important part because they went back and they did it again for X-Men First Class.
Right.
And they kind of elaborated more upon it.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of things that they did that made you feel like these movies were interconnected. But, the very raw power of that opening scene and seeing the trauma of what's unfolding and obviously what it triggers, it lends both to the gravity of the situation as well as, eventually the reason why the antagonist in this story is who they are and what, their beliefs are, because they've already lived through one type of why can't I remember the name of the word? One type of Holocaust, one type of, attempted annihilation of an entire race.
Oh,
And
like a
then,
genocide. Yeah.
yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And, then to also, it turns out that you are a member of the Homo superior part of the human race, got some concerns. I'm just saying. I'm not saying Magneto was right, okay? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that he had some ideas and it's understandable where he came from.
Well, okay, so let's investigate this for a second because honestly, I'll be with you. I actually think that Magneto and Xavier were both right. It was just how they went about it. They both
Mm-hmm.
had the same objective, protecting mutants and trying to find a way to exist and prevent, their race from being destroyed. The problem was Eric is coming from it as a survivor of a genocide from, the 1930s and 40s, and seeing what they did and saying never again and never letting it get to that point. Whereas Xavier says, I feel like we can change the course of things and we can prevent that from happening. Yes, it's going in that direction, but we can be the difference. And it's two directions attacking the same problem with the right intents. It's just their perceived outcomes that become the problem.
Well, it's the nature versus nurture argument, right? Two different upbringings, two different experiences, life experiences. And they touched on it in X-Men 97. You know, Magneto came up in much harsher conditions. He dealt with a lot more trauma, as we said. And Professor X, you know, was kind of living a lofty lifestyle, even though he was still subject to, you know, um, uh, prejudice and discrimination. But you know, he didn't have to see it like Eric saw it. You know, in the dirt, in the mud. Professor X was living high. You know, he didn't have a whole lot to worry about other than just not letting people know what he could do, and he didn't get to see the worst. I mean, he knew what humanity could probably do, but he didn't get to see it firsthand like Eric.
It's funny because this came out in the 2000s, but a term that would be more applicable is something that's more recent. Is Xavier was blinded by his own privilege.
Yeah.
He didn't go through the oppression. He was, I mean, let's face it, he came from established wealth. He probably had, or he at least knew how to stay under the radar of his family, especially because his talent could bode into the fact that even if someone figured out he was a mutant, he could change their mind.
Yep.
So it's almost unfair for Xavier. Listen, great intent. Raise individuals, give them a place where their families may not understand because they don't live in a place like Xavier did, and give them an opportunity, show them how they can use their powers for good, and then also lobby, you know, the government to understand how bad it is. But it's like for him to just say, you know, Eric, you're wrong. You know, it's based off of his privilege, and it's one of those things where you have to kind of realize, like, just like we talk about like people of color where they've gone through oppression, and we say, well, okay, like myself, I'm half Arabic, but I'm passingly white. My type of oppression could never be to the magnitude of somebody else's, and so even then, like, yes, I know people will see my name and they'll you know, they'll be antagonistic, but at the same time it can never override or could, you know, make me cancel out somebody else's, you know, conflict that they've gone through in their oppression. And it's one of those things where it's like I feel like that's part of what I loved about the X-Men was this idea that, you know, Magneto does bad stuff, but it's always for the betterment of his own kind. And unfortunately, he is playing off of, just like he did in the X-Men 97, he's playing off of the hate of other people. It's like, listen, I know what you're capable of, and I know what you do. You can't, even mutants have varying abilities. So there's never one mutant that's the same as another. And so mutants could easily be prejudiced against. You have Azael, you have Nightcrawler, who are visibly different. You have Mystique, who, you know, she said, you know, to Kelly at that scene, you know, you're the reason why I was afraid to go to school as a kid. There's this idea where some mutants could hide their abilities, some can't, and even though they're different types, they still accept each other because they're one kind. And mankind struggled with that and struggles with that. And even now, if you think about the commentary that is in real life, it's very much something that people struggle with. People can't let people live regarding orientation or origin. Even politically, you could just think politically differently than somebody else. And half the country thinks that you're an evil individual. And so it's one of those things where you have to be. Xavier just didn't have the mindset to understand. I think there would have been a better bridge between him and Eric. I think that's where X-Men 97, I think, kind of builds better is just like Xavier had the faith for Magneto to do it. Unfortunately, things went really, really wrong in the process. But yeah, I think I don't think Magneto was wrong at all. I just think he did it wrong.
Well, I think we should kind of, I don't want to say hit pause, but since we've almost hit the half hour mark and we haven't gotten past the first movie, I think one of the things that might be good to do is just kind of discuss overall like the casting in this first movie as well, because obviously we all heard Patrick Stewart and we're like, oh yeah, there's Professor Xavier right there. And I think that honestly speaking, it had exceptionally good casting for this movie.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
my
Mhm.
only complaint is I would have liked a little more of, and that's probably the expectation from the cartoon, but I would have liked a little more southern drawl to Rogue if I had to complain about anything in that movie. But you got strong actor in Magneto.
Mhm.
Scott Summers was cast well. Even Jean Grey, I think, was cast really well, and it's definitely strength that carried into the next movie as well. But I just it's not very often that Hollywood in casting a movie gets it right so well. And at the time we knew nothing of Hugh Jackman, at least I didn't.
No,
Yeah. I didn't like Rogue in this movie. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, let's face it, I love Rogue. Um,
I love Anna
I wanted
Paquin.
her to
I thought
be.
she was really good, but as far as like the version of Rogue they went with, I didn't like. Young, didn't have all the Miss Marvel
Yeah.
powers and stuff, but I knew what they were trying to do. But yeah, I'm with you.
I don't know. I felt like they had some great things going for it. Maybe it's just that they didn't know how. Like, if they aged up Rogue, then you have to have Remy. You've got to have Gambit, and of course, we're talking about early CGI. Gambit was probably just like a really hard. I mean, Scott's the I beams were pretty cool, but they were limited. Like, he didn't do a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of them. And so they had to pick and choose. I get it for the story's sake. I just kind of, I don't know, the whole Iceman and Rogue relationship, and especially going into X2, like, it wasn't my favorite. um I did like seeing, and I'm just gonna throw this up here, I liked seeing Logan and Rogue kind of having like this relationship where they were kind of two outcasts that were struggling
Mm-hmm.
with things. Him with his past, her with her ability, and they kind of found each other. And it was a better story than just Wolverine showing up. It gave two sides. And I also thought it was interesting because I think the reason why they did it was uh Hugh Jackman was relatively new to movies. This was like his breakout thing. He was better known for theater. Um, and it was a bet. They may have been gambling with him, which I think, if you think of the storyline, like in this scene, especially, he realizes that the plot is not about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it didn't work out, it's okay, because it wasn't about Wolverine in the first place. It was about Rogue. And it was a great way of saying, okay, guys, if you don't like him, we can get rid of him. But if he works, we're going to keep him. We'll run with him. But we think it's about Wolverine, but it's not really.
Man, still talk about a character that defines you. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? He obviously, how many movies has he played Wolverine in now? And we're going into one new one. It's like, my goodness.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm all I can say is he's probably very thankful that they went with the costume choice that they did, because it meant that even though he'd probably got his arms nice and ripped, he could have a sandwich. You know what I'm saying?
I
uh,
also like how they really went for the hair, because I knew they weren't going to put him in a cowl at any time. So
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I realized going back, it's like, okay, the costume choice. And of course, if you've watched X-Men 97, you've got to watch this film, because when they finally suit up to go for Rogue, he's struggling with the outfit. And of course, Scott looks at him and says, what were you expecting? Yellow spandex, which is an Easter egg, because Scott says the same thing to Cable, but what did you expect? Black leather. So it was perfect.
Oh, and
Uh,
how can we forget? You finally see Wolverine in a costume. So, okay, we're all accepting of the leather daddy approach to all of these outfits. But at the moment where he's just looking and then just whoosh, and it's like, okay, that fixes it. And not to
yep.
mention being able to use it to give Scott the finger, but
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, mind you, the suit wasn't that great and it wasn't very pronounced, but it was still pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I thought it worked. I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah.
I think the important thing in any superhero movie, any comic book movie, is you have to come up with a costume that people can cosplay. Okay. And this
Yeah.
you could one way or another. You know, obviously you're not going to replicate this one with craft foam, but, or you probably could some elements. But, you know, at least it was still something that was a good definitive look that carried them across. And at least, you know, they added the trim. So there was a little bit of yellow present. There was something there.
Yeah, they gave him the stripes on the ribs to kind of get the tiger stripes. I think a lot of what they did, in especially this time period, was it had to be like you know, there had to be a reason for what they wore. Like, why would they just wear yellow spandex? They need something. Leather is a little more durable, and you know, it would be
It's more
better.
battle ready.
Yeah, it's better suited for what they were going to do. So they were really focusing on that, I believe.
As long as we're going to dig into Rogue, I think it's also fair to kind of dig into Sabretooth on this one, right? It's safe.
Oh, I wish I had a picture of him. Like, he's straight from the comics, but dumb as dirt.
Yeah, just like, oh my gosh. Is that Ron Perlman from Beauty and the Beast? What's going on? That's a dated reference too.
My favorite part was when he drops Kelly, when he loses Kelly from the cell, and he just looks at Magneto. Magneto basically understood exactly from that look, you know, you screwed up again, didn't you? And then locks him in the cell, which was perfect.
I thought he looked pretty cool, but he didn't have that Sabretooth like character to him, you know, that just serial killer, maniacal, sadistic guy. He was just a tank, right? He was Magneto's tank, and I didn't like that about him, and I don't think they ever referenced them having a background either, you know. So
yeah, no, that never came out, and plus there was something about his costume that just always rubbed me the wrong way. It was like somebody said, "Okay, we're gonna do Sabretooth, but let's give him a little, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage to the costume."
yes.
Oh, I always thought it was like he stole like the Cro-Magnon man like outfit from a museum too. Like it was just it was almost like showing like yeah they've evolved, but they've kind of de-evolved too. I mean it's you know it's pretty funny. Yeah, and then that ending, I love the idea that you could see Xavier and Eric talking to each other and discussing and letting Eric basically letting him know I'm not going to stop, and then Xavier's like, well, I'll be there for you. Now I'll be there for it. And then just the zoom out where it's this enormous, you know, plastic cell like suspended by non-metal cables and is out of his range. It also kind of showed like what his range really was, and then it was like a concrete building, and yeah, it was. I thought it was awesome. I just thought it was absolutely awesome how they ended it.
Yeah, anytime like these two were on screen, it was some, you know, best parts of the movie as far as dialogue goes and acting goes. There's man, anytime they were on screen, it was really, really good.
Yeah, they brought a lot of gravitas, and I'm not certain, but I don't know if they, you know, both being British actors, I don't know if they met on this film, but if they didn't, they certainly became far more bonded because from this moment on, there was basically a friendship established from our perception,
Yeah.
you know, going on through the ages. So a lot of great things came out of this first movie.
I know they were both heavily into Shakespeare. They did a lot of Shakespeare acting before this, so I have to think that they came across each other a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Ian McKellen is actually in a play right now, so like he's still active and doing stuff. Which, I mean, he was old here, and it's 24 years since then.
Dude, I can't even walk up my stairs. Okay, come on.
You know, and it's interesting because like I when I think of him, he's done a lot of amazing roles, but of course you think of this and you think of Gandalf, and yes, that's not everything that he's ever done, but those are amazing, and just those two by itself, it's amazing. I think he took it. Wasn't Sean Connery offered the role of Gandalf
Not
in Lord of the
sure.
Rings? I remember somebody else was offered and he declined it, and I think he declined it for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And
Well, that
and
was a
then,
good choice.
Good for
yeah,
him.
so something like that. But Yeah, it's crazy. I love those two. I will say, going back and watching this movie again, I forgot just how young Patrick Stewart looked in this.
Yeah.
Well, especially if you're keeping current and you catch him like on Star Trek Picard on Paramount Plus, then you're just like, oh wow, yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? And he doesn't even come
Also in
across.
Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, but he doesn't really come off as old as he
Yeah.
does in Picard. Now that could be part of the performance or lending more of himself to it because this is an elder statesman. But we're not here to talk about Star Trek, right?
Well,
Although I just
remember,
realized now, and I don't want to get into, obviously too much moving ahead, but I just realized the little bit of symmetry that exists between, like the First Class era and then these movies. The second movie in the sequence of films involves busting Magneto out. I just realized that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Son of a gun.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on. We're doing good. We're going to go into X2, X-Men United. I would say quintessentially the only movie that in my mind gets close to surpassing this one is X-Men First Class. I thought First Class was done really well. But this is by far my favorite X-Men movie, not including the Deadpool films, but by far my favorite X-Men movie, and was one of the reasons why I started getting really deep back into Marvel.
It's the last one I remember.
that could be a good
of that era of films, it goes X1, X2, then we jump forward to X-Men First Class and so on. That's
yeah. X3, we can talk about that next week, but yeah, mistakes were made. Now this was done May 2003. This is basically 3 years after the first. The movie takes place basically a month after the first film, like within the timeline.
Mhm.
Again, Bryan Singer's the director. They up the ante, going from $75 million to $110 million, which also was a really good gamble to make, because this thing made almost twice as much money. And I think it was actually like $150 million more than the last one. And so this was definitely a good step in the right direction, and mainly because of this guy right here in this opening.
Mhm.
As much as I loved Magneto, in the concentration camp, showing off his abilities as a young kid, helping set the standard of things, I can't tell you how excited I was the first time I heard a Banff in this thing.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like the schnicked with the claws, but Banff was. I loved Nightcrawler. I think Nightcrawler is one of those really cool X-Men beyond Rogue and how awesome Rogue is. I think Nightcrawler is one of the coolest characters when it comes to the X-Men cast. And this was just a great step in the right direction when it comes to like the CGI and the use of the special effects.
And again,
Great
excellent
opening.
casting.
Yes.
Which is funny though, because after this film, he didn't really do much for me in anything else. I think the last time I ever recognized him in anything else was like The Son of the Mask, and that was terrible.
Yeah.
I don't remember that movie.
Yeah.
But he did a great job as Nightcrawler.
Mm-hmm.
Like to expand on my first theater experience with this, we talked about it before. This was one of my first like midnight showings that I went to, was X2. And this was before like assigned seating as well. So I got there a little late. Theater is packed. And I have to sit like front left row corner, right? So basically,
wow.
I'm looking like this the whole time. But I didn't care, because after this scene happened, like we were like jumping out of our seats. The whole theater was going wild watching Nightcrawler doing what he was doing. So it made a really big impact, and it set the tone for the rest of the movie.
What's also really cool about this movie is up until this point, if you look at Marvel films, they're all isolated in themselves. There might be an Easter egg here or there. This movie expanded the universe in a way that not many Marvel films did until Marvel Studios got into the cinematic universe. And having him and his engagement, like what they were doing with him, and then you find Mystique trying to figure out where Magneto is, trying to discover. She breaks into a character that we haven't even talked about yet, but William Stryker, who of course is part of Project, of Weapon X. She's looking for different things, and this is the coolest thing. Okay, so that first one, Harada, I'm gonna butcher the name. Keniucho, that's Silver Samurai, and you've got Remy there. All of those characters are characters that you can kind of like, go back and reference to the comics.
You got Jamie Madrox, Multiple Man.
Now, this is hard to see. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to expand this for just a minute. We're going to hide. So you've got Franklin Richards being mentioned, Mur Island, the Murlocs. You've got Omega Red. You've got Forge referenced.
Bro, Alpha Flight. Come on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's Alpha Flight. If you go up to the upper left-hand corner, Wade Wilson is referenced.
Yep.
Hold on a second. Wade Wilson, he's the middle column, second one down. They go deep into okay, and let me go back here real quick. Okay, so from this image, one over, you see Andreas von Strucker.
Mm-hmm.
That's Baron Strucker's son. Who was bioengineered by Arnim Zola. So like the stuff that they mentioned in this was exciting to me. Just kind of looking at it, I fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Okay,
it's one of the cooler things. It obviously starts a cycle of just teasing us with things on screens that play off through the years.
And then, of course, William Stryker.
The
dude villain. Was a great villain.
Yeah, what a great villain.
He really was.
You think, you go back to the first film, it's not so much mankind is a threat, but they're not the villain. It's Magneto, which is funny though, because what he does in this film reminds me of in the previous film, reminded me of what he did in Marvel Zombies, where he tried to, change the world all into mutants, and it went really bad. But to have a human villain in this was definitely a nice change. And for him, it was a great concept. And you think back, like for Smallville, Chloe in the Smallville show, was so popular with the TV show series that they ended up, creating the character in the comics. The Guardians of the Galaxy, when the movies came out, immediately changed the way the costumes and everything were in the comics, because they were relatively new, and they went with what people loved. Stryker with his son, Jason, actually, we can talk about her in a second, but with Jason, if I can get to him. Yeah, Jason Stryker. Me and Mickey were talking about this beforehand. He was actually killed in the comics, and because of how the movies went, they retconned it and brought him back. Not for anything big, but they at least changed that. And it's nice when you see the comics, can take a note from the movies and say, okay, this went really well. Let's go ahead and let's bend into it. But let's go ahead back and let's talk about this one.
I wasn't a fan.
Yeah, same.
I liked her. I
mean, hopefully, because you're going to see her again.
She was cool, but I felt like she was really done a disservice if we're talking about comic book adaptation to movie. And I know she was under kind of like a mind control thing, so it was a little different in aspects, but she's such a powerful female character and strong, just a great Wolverine villain and X-Men villain in the comics, and she just kind of got simplified to henchmen,
Yeah. I think with what we've seen in the previews for Deadpool and Wolverine, it would be nice to see if we get more from her.
I'd love to see a redemption for that. Yeah.
I liked the potential the potential villain that she was, I do think she was dispatched a little bit too quickly. Um,
But a really cool on-screen death, like probably one of the best out of any
Ugh.
superhero.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's a lot of valuable metal put to waste, though.
Just the sound effects guy. I hope he got paid millions of dollars for that gong when she hit the bottom of that thing. It was
You know, it's funny you mention that because there's only one other time where, in a Marvel movie, I would really commend the sound mixer, and it's if you're ever really listening with a really good system, and you're watching Endgame. In the moment that Tony runs up and grabs the nano gauntlet, you can very subtly hear gears turning and everything else because that's his gloves stealing back all of the Infinity Stones.
yeah.
And it's just like,
yeah.
ooh. So yeah.
Oh,
Sounds
it's that
important.
attention to detail. Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely that attention to detail. I think that makes it so important. Um, yeah, I think it's terrible when you think about it because I mean, like, it's almost reminiscent to like the death of Wolverine in the comics, where he's encased in adamantium, so it's definitely like a very similar thing, which we know what happens in the comics. So there's always hope. Like maybe they would go back in the story and be like, yeah, I took her out of the pool and I fixed her. that would be crazy. But hey, it's Marvel. They can do whatever they want.
You can get
Most
Um,
definitely.
oh,
you can
oh,
get a
let's go
fair.
back here real quick. By far, I think some of the best Wolverine action
Yes.
that takes place in this, like there's there. I think Fox tried in X-Men Origins Wolverine to give him like a berserk mode and kind of like try to go into that mode. I it didn't work well for me. This was always one of those things where it's kind of like there's no self-regard. He's just jumping into it. It took the kids to stop him.
Yeah. He was visceral, man. Just
Mm-hmm.
that was the most Wolverine had ever been for me. Like just animalistic defense mode, and I almost lost my wife during this scene. I didn't know where she was going there. I just heard a few oohs and ahs at shirtless Hugh Jackman, all jacked up. Especially when she like slammed that guy. I think it was a fridge. He slammed him up against, and you could just see his muscles. And she's like,
Suddenly she was the one being slammed against the fridge.
I was like, oh, you
Yeah.
got this stuff now? Okay.
Yeah, and I just going back, the whole Iceman thing with Rogue, I love the fact that he felt like Wolverine was a threat,
Oh yeah.
and he's challenging, like he's a kid and she's a kid, like the jealousy that had to happen with this kid to think that. But then I loved the engagement they had in the kitchen where, which in the internet, the American version, when he's looking for something other than chocolate milk, he tells him to look in the cabinet for Dr. Pepper. In the international version, it just says soda, but both of them are Dr. Peppers. And of course, you've got him making it frosty for Logan, which I thought was pretty fun.
And as long as we're talking about this movie, I think you have to appreciate the fact that it to me, it was actually a better story than the first film. It actually
I agree.
built.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of those rare opportunities where the sequel was better. And it's just like, oh my gosh. The hits that they hit with this were just right. And I don't understand how it went so wrong afterwards. But but for me, like, I'm going to have to do my homework if I sit in on more of this because I don't remember much of X3 at all.
Good
I
reason.
yeah, I don't, and I don't even know if anything else happens after that. I don't remember the introduction of Deadpool and how much it must have broken Ryan Reynolds' heart to play that version of the character. So, whereas with this, it's just a wonderful story overall from beginning to end, and it was so much more thought out, I think, than the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah.
see all of that on screen, right down to the Magneto's, saving scene, the breakout scene. I just like you've had too much lead in your diet,
Yeah.
And
or iron, too much iron in your diet.
before we move on from that Wolverine's that whole school attack scene, don't forget we got to see Colossus in action, or at least a little bit. We got to see
Mm-hmm.
the
Oh, yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, no accent though, which was a little bit
I
disappointing.
need a
But
Russian accent, bro.
yeah, I can help them. It's like help your accent.
You can say, I can help in a Russian accent. That's all you got to say, man.
I can do it, comrade.
I can do.
Exactly. Yet. Um, so what was interesting was the first two X-Men films really, like, they all hovered around exploitation of mutant abilities. Um, Magneto exploits Rogue's ability so that he saves himself from doing. Now, what he was intending wasn't meant to kill anybody. What he was doing was meant to, to change them. If the world leaders were all mutants, then they'd all, speak in behalf of mutants. It would, things would change. The problem was he didn't know he was going to kill him. This one, Stryker goes right to the throat, utilizing Jason's ability to cause illusions and visions to cause Xavier to basically concentrate on finding all the mutants, which the precursor, when Xavier is in Cerebro with Wolverine's like, well, can't you concentrate a little bit harder to find Nightcrawler? He's like, no, if I wanted to kill him, I would do that. And so it was very much the precursor of like, if Xavier concentrates too hard, he can kill people with Cerebro. And that's very much William Stryker's plan, is to kill all the mutants. But then Magneto goes in and turns that around and uses Mystique to convince Jason to now make him go after all the humans. And it was definitely one of those things where you didn't know, you didn't know it was going to go in that direction, but it made perfect sense. Magneto acted in response to everything that he was encountering. And I couldn't blame him in the moment of deciding to do that. Like, oh, that's what you're wanting to do. Well, we can turn that around and do that exactly to you.
Speaking of,
But
we kind of we skipped over his prison escape scene, which was really cool, where Mystique injected the guard with some
yeah,
mercury, I think it was, or something,
iron,
and he just
she
pulled it out.
injected iron in the guard's butt. Yeah.
Three little balls, and was just using them as bullets. Man, that was epic. So you knew they were going to wreck shop later somehow.
Oh yeah, and then the one ball that turned into a large disc, he just stands on it and just rides
cool.
it.
So cool.
It's just amazing.
Standing tall with his arms behind his back, totally Magneto, just regally floating through the air.
Now here's a question that I have. Okay, so he's the master of magnetism. Does his suit, the Magneto suit, typically have metal in it that makes him be able to fly, or is he able to just use the Earth's magnetic force against itself?
Yeah, I always thought he just manipulated like the polar waves and magnetic waves of the Earth to do that. Like that's how he floats in his little force field or whatever.
Okay, which also makes sense because that's why his cell is basically is this one space inside this giant concrete sphere, because it's just far enough to where he can't use his ability. Okay.
Right.
Which kind of messes with it when you think of X-Men 97, how he went in the Earth's stratosphere.
Yeah.
I will say, I used to complain about Bryan Singer's X-Men movies because I always felt like he had the toys, he pulled them out, and he just did whatever he wanted with them. He didn't really worry about what the comics did. And in this film, it did really well because the characters just had to be the characters, and it was just a self-contained story. I think it did really well. Now it did expand and it gave like hints to other stuff. But it was just a fun film. I think the first one was a little too, I don't know. It was a little too paint by numbers.
Yeah.
The third one, I think, was where they went too far. And of course, Singer had nothing to do with it.
Right.
Which I don't think he could have. Yeah. We're not going to talk about. It's like Bruno. And then see, I think I have one more slide here. Oh, this.
The tease.
The promise that never would come to be.
And I want to say, James Marsden played this scene so well. Like the way he was emotionally like distraught over what was happening, and him and Logan have this amazing moment where he's like, "She's gone, man. Like she's gone." Like I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about her right now. Like they did such a good like. I that's one of those like just one of those moments I always remember from these movies is them kind of Logan's like getting him to accept the fact that dude, she's saving us. She's gone. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah, I always assumed that after X2, because of how much I enjoyed it while I was watching it, that there would probably be another movie. And it was the first time that a sequel had a tease for something for me that I really got super excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just, there was this concept when you started seeing the what looked like the Phoenix in the water. Mind you, it wasn't the Phoenix Force that we know from the comics because it's
Right.
a cosmic being, but just the idea that somehow Jean was manifesting this ability, and that this meant, okay, well, Jean's not dead. This is absolutely coming back. We're gonna get this, and
Yeah.
this is gonna be amazing. I remember how excited I was after this film, and I almost wish that it would have never had a sequel, because then it just could have let your imagination run.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it gave us a reason to have other films and do Days of Future Past. But yeah, I mean, the promise here, and you knew when she started manifesting the ability, even when she's holding the water back. And for those of you who haven't watched this, if you haven't seen this film yet, why are you watching this? But second of all, Alkali Lake, the dam started to break, and in order to get the jet out of the area and safe, and everybody safe from all the kids and everybody that are captive, she had to hold back the entire water. And this is not like a Doctor Strange like pushing the water away. This was like Jean Grey using her ability, which at the beginning of this film, Scott says in the museum, it's been a month, and just a month ago you could barely move a book across the room.
Yeah.
And for her to do this and to unlock this ability was super exciting, because you knew it was building up to this moment.
Yeah, they did a really good job of character development with Jean, I thought, in these two movies. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Logan and others too, but Jean was like the one kind of like flying under the radar that was really developing into a cool character, and they were taking it real easy with her. And this movie is when they kind of laid hints throughout the movie that she was getting stronger, or she was having those dreams that were like making her powers go crazy, that you knew.
Oh yeah, the electronic interference on
Yeah,
the screens in the
yeah.
museum.
So that was
Yes.
really cool. And then just we get here and you just know it. When she walks outside, you're like, oh yeah, I know what she's about to do.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember why the ship couldn't fly. I feel like did Magneto or Mystique sabotage it somehow? I can't remember. Something shut it down where it just wouldn't take off. And the only way they could get out was her doing that.
Magneto took a helicopter, if I remember correctly. I didn't. So I was rewatching this, and today, and I couldn't get to the ending. I think they needed time to get it up off the ground,
Yeah,
because there was an issue.
yeah.
But she was she was trying to save them all, because they were trying to wait. I think they were waiting. They waited too long for like the last group of people.
That's right. They had all the kids that they were bringing with them, right? That they
Yeah, I think
broke
Logan had
out.
to like.
Yeah.
Yeah, Logan was like the last on the plane or whatever.
And
So
you know, before the dam broke too, it was a pretty cool scene with Magneto straps Stryker to the helicopter or whatever it was he was trying to get away on. And he's like,
yep.
"Nah, you're not going anywhere, buddy. Like you're gonna go down with the ship." And I think at this point also we haven't talked about Pyro at all, but they had convinced him to come along with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, so to speak.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing that the third movie does really well. I could talk about this next week, but they had more mutants, and they had more of a compelling, group of I wouldn't say freedom. They were more like domestic terrorists at that point.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, like you could tell he was always leaning toward, like, he got a very little screen time in the first film. You just had him, making the little fireball behind
yeah,
his back.
yeah.
This one, you just have him acting like a jerk the entire time, back and forth, playing with the lighter and everything else. And of course, Magneto does help him, level up a bit in his abilities. But
Yeah, I think
it was interesting, because I really, there were so many little bits, and I know we're missing a lot. Like there's the whole
yeah,
thing where Mystique goes into the tent with Logan and pretends to be Jean Grey.
yeah, oh yeah.
Um and you can still see the scars from where he had stabbed her from the first film. There's the whole thing where Jason Stryker is pretending to be like a 6-year-old little girl that's like
That's great.
pleading on Xavier because Xavier has a heart for kids and he's being manipulated.
Yeah.
You know, there's the whole conversation between Stryker. Stryker knew what Xavier was doing. Like, this isn't even about against mutants per se. This is also a vendetta against Xavier because he was convinced that Xavier could cure his son, and Xavier was trying to help Stryker be convinced that what he had was a gift; it wasn't a curse.
Yeah.
And of course, what is the kid going to do? He's going to come back from a place that was trying to help foster, you know, his strength, and he ended up making his mother, you know, take herself or her own life. And there's so many little nuances to this film where they did a lot of stuff right.
Oh yeah.
And it just made so much fun. You know, we had the tease in those monitors of Trask. You had all these concepts, and of course we're gonna get in the next film we'll get at least a tease of a Sentinel.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like, you know, like what we see later on. But man, it was such a good movie.
Yeah, a lot of building blocks put in place throughout both movies, especially this one, that just, you know, it gave us a really good payoff. Like they built a good foundation, and you know, they just didn't finish the house in the next movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It was also funny because like Hank McCoy is referenced in a screen during a news report because he's giving an interview, but he's not blue and furry.
Yeah.
And of course we get him, you know, later on, which I always think of like Frasier is Hank McCoy. But you know, you've got that, and then of course at the end, where the mutants where the X-Men they go and they present themselves to the president.
Oh yeah.
And that was a great way of like basically letting him know, you know, we're there, we're gonna do the right thing, but you need to be aware. And of course they gave him all the information to let him know that Stryker had been manipulating him.
Yeah, that's another great example of Xavier's power. Which earlier in this movie where he like stopped everyone in the airport
in the museum.
The museum, like just man, you just knew this guy. This guy was a powerhouse, man. He could do whatever he wanted, but to show that restraint, that's Professor X, you know.
Yeah, I also liked going back a little bit further. They just escaped the mansion from the military strike. You've got Logan and the kids basically going back to, it was Bobby's house, right?
Yeah,
Bobby. And so they're there, and of course Bobby finally, you know, gives in and kisses Rogue, and that first kiss where he kisses her and then all of a sudden she blows cold air, I thought was pretty fun. And then of course like just the banter back and forth with them in the room when they're telling about like Bobby having abilities and stuff. And it makes perfect sense. Like the brother was just completely resentful and angry. But yeah, it's so much fun.
Absolutely.
So much fun. Well, I don't know if there's anything else we can talk about. Is there anything else you think you want to bring up?
No, I think we hit on everything in these two movies that was real big, real important.
Yeah. You know what? I'll be honest with you. It was just nice to have an excuse to go back and watch them.
Yeah.
I know I caught you by surprise. Like you said, you wanted to do this, and then like, but I just watched the first film last night with my son, and he was into it. And of course, he's a Ninja Turtles fan, and so he's like, "They're mutants," and I go, "Yeah, but they're the original mutants."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well," I'm like, "Before the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there were the X-Men."
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun to introduce him. That's how I got him hooked, and then he just enjoyed the movie. I still haven't watched X2 with him. I did it separately, so I'd at least have some recollection of things.
Yeah. I think I've seen X2 so many times, like it's burned in my memory. So
yeah. Now next week is gonna be the hard job. X3, X-Men Last Stand, and X-Men Origins Wolverine. I don't know why I did that to myself. I'm kind of trying to go chronological order, not release order, but necessarily, but the actual like timeline order when you think about how these films are being portrayed. So it's not going to be super fun.
The fun we had this time may be turned down a few notches next time. Or actually,
okay. Here's what I say. You're going to be with me next week? I'll put you on the spot.
Yep.
Okay. Watch the films. If we can't say anything nice, we can at least make it like a riff track. Because I'll be honest with you, I have a lot to say about Logan's CGI claws or X-Men Origins.
Dude, yeah. And also, X3 introduced one of my favorite X-Men, Warren Worthington, and he was actually pretty daggone good. You know what I mean? That was a pretty good representation of Warren.
Mhm.
Just, yeah. The rest of the
But
movie
then
felt.
Juggernaut.
uh,
Oh my goodness. I was so excited when they redid Juggernaut in Deadpool. And I think that's no, Deadpool 2.
yeah,
So
so
I think
good.
it's one of my favorite things about Deadpool 2 because it just is perfect.
Just him and Colossus going at it. Like, I love that rivalry. So it was really great to see that on screen, especially making them that big. It was awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So basically the way this works, this time, no, 8:00 Eastern time next week, we're going to be on again here. You can find us on all the different socials. And we're going to be talking about X-Men or X2, or I'm sorry, X3, X-Men Last Stand. The X-Men film of the trilogy that was not done by Bryan Singer because he was too busy ruining Superman. And so so we'll be doing that, and we'll be doing X-Men Origins Wolverine, which in any sense, they at least try to make them worthwhile in something. You at least get to find out where he got that jacket from the first film. Yeah. And and we get a terrible and again, it gave us the best retcon in the Deadpool films.
Yes.
When Deadpool goes back and kills that version of Wade. That I love that. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I'm gonna go back and watch them. I will say this before we get started. I remember I was so excited to watch it. Remember there was a leak of X3
Yes.
that was going around on the internet, like the first real big internet leak of anything. And I remember I saw it, and then I hoped that it was like it was like a fake leak, like it was not the real film, and
Yeah.
I was disappointed when I finally saw it. But yeah, it's definitely it's a movie. So we'll be talking about that next week. Be sure to follow Mickey wherever he's at on Cell Phone Wallet Keys. Mickey, can you kind of give us like a quick plug for yourself?
Oh, yeah, you already said it. Cell Phone Wallet Keys on all socials: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook. And you can always catch me here on Nerd Initiative doing something every Wednesday, comic book reviews. And I pop in on these and fandoms every now and then. So, I'm always around.
Absolutely. And there's the link down there for new comic book reviews. Also tomorrow night, there will be a Wrestling Night Live episode. Be able to catch Rich and Ken as they talk about wrestling. Also there is, hold on, Tuesday nights, we have Turn a Page. If you are a comic book fan and you love, that went way too fast. Where'd it go? If you are a comic book fan and you love hearing people talk about comics, you're going to want to go ahead and check them out. You can also contact us through our contact page on the website. It'll also take you to the website, but put your name down so you can be added to our newsletter for future newsletters. And then also, just to keep the lights on, please be sure to check us out, our merch store. So you can get some pretty cool stuff. I'm not wearing the hat right now. It is sitting here behind me. But it is a nice hat. On top of other things you can get.
I want to add one thing: new show, Doctor Who in review on Monday nights with off the cuff Tom. It's a great time. He's done 2 episodes so far. There'll be another one this Monday, which I will be on. I'll be guest starring on. So come check us out.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't have a link for it tonight. I'll have to get them to do that. But yeah, absolutely. And then of course, Fandoms is not this week, but the next week. And of course, you'll catch us here again, 8 p.m. Wednesday, X3, X-Men Last Stand, and X-Men Origins Wolverine. I promise you, it does get better after this.
It'll be fun.
And we're gonna be doing these things every single week until we get to the week before Deadpool and Wolverine, which is going to be that Thursday it's released. Officially, it's Friday. But I'm going to go see it on that Thursday night. And then I'm going to do a special edition of Fandoms on the 26th. Mickey, you are welcome to join to talk. I don't know if you're going to be able to get to see Deadpool Wolverine on opening night, but we're going to try. But yeah, with that said, Mickey, thank you so much for joining me. Will, even though you had to leave early, be sure to check out Will. He's also doing his show probably tomorrow with Trent Netheads. You can catch him here. And yeah, with that said, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, guys.